Hello, and welcome to Penny for a Tale. My name is Mitchell, and this is a show that explores tabletop role playing games, anything and everything. We jump into everything. First off, I'd like to welcome our super awesome. I'm super ecstatic, as you can kind of tell. Darcy Ross, who is the community relations coordinator for Monty Cook Games. But not only that, she is an Evo Devo biologist, snail aficionado, gamer, and amateur mixologist. There we go. All right, can you speak again? I think I had you muted there.
Oop,
There we
happy to
go.
be here. Yep.
Awesome. We're good to go.
Heck yeah.
So for everyone who, I guess, who is not like me and doesn't follow Monty Cook Games, Invisible Sun, and everything that you've been doing up for like the past couple of years, can you just say who you are?
Absolutely. For folks who don't know Monte Cook Games, we make a variety of games that originated with Numenera, which is how I sort of initially found the company. Monte Cook is was instrumental in a lot of Dungeons and Dragons from third edition, from second edition. He wrote a lot of cool Planescape material, a really wild, plain, mind bendy second edition setting. But he's also, uh, dove off and has created a number of other sort of passion projects, and Monte Cook Games sort of sprung out from that. And now we have a whole little company of great people that I get to work with. So Numenera was the game that sort of started us all, and it was a game set on Earth a billion years in the future. And so the idea is that all these civilizations came to enormous technological prowess and then died or ascended or left. And so you play humans sort of back on Earth, exploring these ruins of this ancient technology so advanced as to seem like magic, right? And so, as a scientist at heart, that is such an interesting evolutionary question. That's such an interesting scientific question. It asks, it requires you to be really scientifically curious. I fell totally in love from there. And since producing Numenera, the role playing game, we've also made the Cypher system, sort of a generic engine that you can use to play any game. And we've built Invisible Sun, which is a really cool, weird passion project of Monty's that I also love. And also No Thank You Evil, which is a game for kids and families from ages like 4 and up. And it's really cute. So we sort of have I would say, like, we have similar sensibilities underneath all of these different projects, but we do have quite a range of settings we like to explore and sort of stories we like to engage in. So I think that's us. I think that's Monty Cook
Yeah,
Games.
yeah. And I know my own son's very excited. I think he wants to start off with Invisible Sun.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean he's less than a year old right now, so I don't completely trust his judgment, but
Does he want the hand?
yeah, he wants the hand. He loves the cards. He loves the box. That's why it's up there where he cannot reach it.
Ah, good call. You got to work your way up to Invisible Sun.
Exactly. You gotta train.
Got to get
Um,
tall enough to hold the box.
no, right? So, you we're just kind of hop into this. You've
Yeah.
spoken of the parallels between plant care and care in the hobby.
Yeah.
Uh, but something I picked up on was, and I think that you were trying to convey is that, forgiving oneself when you fail.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you feel you have failed a gaming group, and how
Oh,
do you recover?
what a great question. I think about failure a lot, especially as a scientist, because that's mostly what I did all day, every day. Failing is part of the game, and if you're not failing, it means you're probably stagnating. So I'm I like to think that I embrace failure more than I actually do. but but when it happens, I think the first thing that I've learned to do when I feel like I've made some big misstep, or I have a session where either as a player or a GM, I just feel like I didn't like bring it, or I did something that sort of threw things off kilter. I first remind myself that um, I have a really limited perspective. I only have my own perspective to reach off of. And um, other people's experiences may not align with how I think the session went. So one of my first things to do is to talk to my fellow players. And so, if I'm feeling like really hot about it and stressed out, I'll, try to give myself some time. But a lot of times what I find is a session that I think went really badly, right? Like, if I'm GMing and I see people tuning, what looks like to me tuning out, or, especially if you're not running comedy where like you get that feedback of laughter, it
Mm-hmm.
can be hard for me to tell who's engaged and how they're interpreting the gameplay. And so my first step is to ask the players, so how do you think that went? Don't even give them leading questions. Just ask, open it up. What was it? And sometimes people like don't know how to give an answer, and so a lot of times I use the tool a rose and a thorn. So I asked each player or fellow player, hey, could you say something that you really liked about the session and something that could have been better? And we go around and say a quick little thing. And a lot of times what I find is I'm surprised by the answers. And so a lot of times the things that I think were my big failures actually didn't register at all to the players, or they had no idea. And so I found, first of all, that a lot of my failures aren't failures in the other people's eyes. And so that helps take the stress off a lot. And then I think the other thing I try to do, even if people are like, oh yeah, that felt really off, and we talk about why, I always like to keep the focus on, okay, this is a great learning opportunity. I'm going to learn to be a better player, a better GM. Like I try to immediately not like wallow in the sadness of having
Yeah.
failed, and I try to ask and kind of workshop some techniques of things that could be better in the future. And I find that a lot of times, my players are excited to tell me, techniques they've learned or ideas they have. And so it becomes this like collaborative learning process instead of me wallowing about how sad I am that I failed everyone, which is how I used to do it.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So that's my approach. I think a lot of talking to my players or talking to trusted, friends afterward
Hmm.
too, and kind of debriefing.
Is that how you kind of recover as well, or do you have something that's kind of a little set apart to
Good
kick back in?
question. Um, I think I do. I really like talking things through. And so sometimes, it's not actually talking things through with my fellow players, but sometimes it is talking with a friend, sort of an objective person where I'm sort of re-explaining the situation, and
Yeah.
a lot of times like some emotions will come up. But I'm sort of, I've stepped back enough away from the situation that now that I'm talking to this third party, I can sort of get to the root of a matter. Um, but I think there's also a place for like mind bleach sometimes. Sometimes like, you know, I just had a rough session and I'm really worn out and I'm going to put some Parks and Rec on. And I think that's really valid too, just something that makes you happy and perks you back up can give me a little space that I need.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've been writing about the tabletop industry for some time, and I believe it was it last year or 2 years ago where you kind of hopped on to like the streaming and the GMing in front of people and an audience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, probably about 2 years ago.
so I mean, you guys came out with this new book, your best game ever,
Yeah.
and so I'm curious at what point or at what kind of things light up in like a GM's history career that says, "Hey, I need to take it to, I guess, the next level and start reading," because
Mm.
you have a wonderful plethora of our like GM advice books that you've been reading, and it's been
Hmm.
amazing checking out all the stuff that you've read. But take it away.
Yeah. I think one thing that definitely your best game ever emerged out of is the fact that there are a lot of some really great books and resources available for sort of GMs to kind of up their craft. Um, but there are at least fewer. They're not non-zero, but fewer resources that are about kind of the overall play experience, about being a good player, about being a good player when you're starting out, when you're trying to sort of, the one-on-one class, the sort of more advanced class for techniques you can use as a player, and the idea that there are some aspects of playing tabletop role-playing games that we should probably be thinking about the GM more as a player than we
Mm-hmm.
often do. So your best game ever dives into things like, hosting a game and handling like interpersonal disputes that might come up. How do you handle a person, whether they're the GM or a different player, who for several reasons might not be a good fit for the group right now. And I think the answer a lot of times is like, talk to your group. And yes, that's all very helpful. But what I like about your best game ever is it gives like specific kind of phrases that you can, that it starts to plug in some of the ways that you can open up that conversation. And so rather than just saying talk to your players, it's like, here are some here's some specific advice or specific phrases that keep it focused on like
Mm-hmm.
the game and not the person. It just seems like really useful kind of social tools, I guess. And so we, your best game ever is a big honkin' book. It's got a bunch of sections. But one thing I like about it is that it does try to touch on, I think it has a lot to offer for someone who is watching all these streams, right, and wants to get to play their first game or GM their first game.
Yeah.
And this book gives you a lot of the tools and gets you kind of going from 0 to 60 much faster. But it also has a lot of like sort of next level tools or advice on online play or advice on some of these kinds of play that even if you've been gaming a long time, you might not have tried yet. So I think it's, the hope was that it could be a book for like pretty much everybody, which is a big hope. But I think because we brought on so many collaborators who helped write on it, like a bunch of streamers like Eric Campbell and Matt, several of the streaming Matts, Matt Colville, and
All the mats.
all the Matts, and Tanya DePass and Ajit George, and like really cool like comic artists who are also think about gaming, like Aviv Orr does up to 4 players, and so they're doing comics, but they've been thinking about gameplay for a long time. So they have a really cute comic in the book. So I guess that's like my thesis statement is that no matter where you're at in gaming, I think you should at least take a look through sort of the preview of your best game ever and see if there's something that piques your interest. Because I think we've built it where it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting to everybody.
Definitely. And for Charizard, thank you for the bits. We are
Yes.
currently talking about your best game ever, James Corp.
Yeah. And we will be, we have if folks are asking where they can get it,
Yeah.
we have pre-orders up on our website right now. So if you go to yourbestgameever.com, it'll redirect you right there. And we do have a little like fulfillment center to help us get to sort of the UK area. So hopefully shipping won't be too bad. So hopefully you should
Yeah.
be able to get it there. But also a bunch of retailers should be carrying it too. So go ask your friendly local gaming store, and hopefully they'll carry it.
Yeah. Get it, James.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff, which is awesome because we had a talk a couple months ago about this whole talking to your players and everything, and it's amazing to
Mhm.
finally have someone to kind of say, all right, what are the techniques and stuff. So definitely
Yeah.
check the book out.
Yeah. There's free previews. Go check it out. I'm really really excited, and it's getting an audiobook edition, which was like, I listened to a lot of audiobooks, so I was like really rooting for it. The Kickstarter funded it, so Rudy Basso I think is recording that, and pretty far along, so that'll be releasing too.
Oh, that is so awesome. I've always felt that every game book should be on Audible.
Right? I I think so. And MCG has been when I got hired by MCG, we started doing some cool Twitch content or sort of ramping that up. And I'm it's like it is waiting for a day when I have a little more time than I currently have. But like I really want to take some of those actual plays and bring them to podcast form, because my start was it more in podcasting than streaming anyway. So I always love doing the dishes and walking around and people gaming in my ears.
Yeah, definitely. I need to put all this to podcast, so that's been a process.
Oh yeah, it's a whole situation. So you have nothing but sympathy from me.
So Davidson asked, when is the
Yeah.
audiobook coming out? They're pretty excited about that.
Oh, I'm so glad you're excited as I am. The Your Best Game Ever is about to be ready. I think pre-orders end on the 17th of July, and then it'll be a little bit, and then it'll probably be shipping out to pre-orders and then up for general sale at the end of the month. The audiobook I know is in sort of like late stages of being recorded, but I've never been a part of creating an audiobook before. So unfortunately, I don't exactly know the steps that have to happen after that, and if there's like a delay for getting it up on Audible.
Yeah.
We have put several novels up on Audible, so I'm sure somebody in the company knows, but it's not me. Sorry.
Yeah, and hopefully, James, it does sound like it will eventually be on Audible,
I
so you
think
can check it
so.
out.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I believe so. That's where our other audiobooks have gone. Yay.
Yeah, and chat, feel free to ask questions. I will get to them as soon as possible. But okay, moving on to the
Yeah.
next question. You've worked with Contessa, an
Yeah.
organization that helps gets minorities and marginalized voices represented
Mm-hmm.
in tabletop games. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have any advice as to ways that every tabletop gamer, GM, player could be more inclusive at their table?
Oh, goodness. That is such a wonderful question. Um, inclusivity can cover so many, types of categories. And I was just thinking the other day, um, I'm going to start with an anecdote rather than answering you,
Yeah,
but I
go ahead.
promise I'll be fast. So a big reason that I got into Numenera was because I have a tattoo of the symbol from before they hired me. I'm a big Numenera, fan. But part of what drew me in was that I saw myself in the book. The art was super, represented a lot of diverse, like, skin tones and facial like structures that suggested to me like a really diverse population,
Mhm.
which I love. And also in the stories, in the book, in the setting, there were women who were villains, and there were women who were heroes, and there were women who were somewhere in between. And so just like the breadth of depictions of kinds of
Mhm.
people really helped like make me feel like this is the most inclusive RPG I've ever seen. And so it made me really want to play. But I also think so. I was looking at a really great supplement we did, or Shauna Germain wrote a couple years back, called "Love and Sex in the Ninth World," and so it's about, hey, it's sort of general advice on dealing with themes of love and sexuality and sex in your role playing games, and specifically in the weird, really disparate kind of diverse place that is the Ninth World of Numenera. And I was looking at that supplement, which I love, and I still think there's really nothing that's been written to date that covers that topic in gaming as well. But if it were written today, there probably would have been a little more like inclusive pronoun usage,
Mhm.
and talks about pronouns in a way that is part of the conversation today and wasn't 5 years ago,
Yeah.
or wasn't like hadn't bubbled up to that being the expectation. So I'm reminded that like you're never perfect, and there's always ways that will improve, and there's ways that I'll look back upon my behavior in 5 years and go, oh my goodness, I was really like behind the times on this or that. So my advice on how every gamer can sort of improve inclusivity at their table is to keep an open mind about not knowing what you might need to be better inclusive about. So I would say, like, don't assume you kind of know the categories that you need to be good about. And so I think the only way to solve that is by having opportunities to talk to your players about it, right? To check in. Um, I think I think part of that. So in Invisible Sun, there's this mechanic called character summaries that you do at the end of every session. And what happens is it's a little bit of a roses and thorns, but in character, right? So,
Yeah.
I played the Cicatrix, and the Cicatrix feels this way about this aspect of play, and this way about another aspect of play. And Monty designed it because he's an introvert. And what he found was introverts at his game would sometimes be kind of quiet during the session, but when he gave them the opportunity to speak on it, they revealed this like complex, wonderful internal experience they'd been having. And so having a space where people can kind of voice those roses, those thorns, in character, out of character, I think will get people feeling comfortable enough to talk about ways they want the game to shift and ways that they want the behavior to shift. So it can be really hard to put people on the spot, like, how could I be better inclusive?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but I think if you sort of lead and say, oh, I was thinking, you know I seem to default to like male NPCs if I'm not thinking about it, and so I'm going to try to watch that. And if you talk about that to your players, if you're the GM or a player, like, if you brought that up to your group, I think they would be like, oh, yeah, that's a thing we could watch out for. And I know you're specifically trying to get better. And so I
Yeah.
will feel comfortable to bring it up to you. That's my hope. Sort of creating that safe discourse for people to bring up how to be better for them specifically.
Yeah, and it's definitely something people should be conversing about all the time. Just
Yeah.
it's a lot there, and the more we talk about it, the more people are getting into it and more knowledgeable about it too.
Yeah. And I definitely like encourage you to, I'm a big cheerleader. So like I'm always like when I see someone like when a GM or a player does something I love, I'm like telling them that instant. I'm like, or I'm trying to be quiet to not interrupt the narrative, but my face is like, oh my gosh. Um, so as much as inclusivity and getting better is telling people like what they could do better, what they can improve, I think like acknowledging when people do something good or making good strides or like, oh yes, this feels like really good to me, like tell your fellow players, they will appreciate it. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So David said 925 says, how
Yeah.
does Cicatrix feel about her ghost girlfriend?
Awesome. The Cicatrix is a character who I played in our The Raven Wants What You Have stream, our actual play of Invisible Sun. And I play a character who has had an experience with the Pale. So presumably she died and is back now and not a ghost. So question mark, question mark, question
Ooh.
mark, backstory. But she has a girlfriend who is a ghost and who is out in the Pale. Um, and so I have a lot of feelings about that. And Ken Davidson, who is Davidson925, did this amazing cosplay with me at Big Bad Con last year as my ghost girlfriend Ori,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
it was the best. It was like the coolest I have ever felt. We took some really great pictures, and so I don't have it, until about like the last year and a half or something. I did. I really love themes of like romance and relationships, but like as a player, I really struggle to kind of like know how to engage in that and to get it started. And so the Raven Wants What You Have was like a big, even though the sort of girlfriend feelings was a bit of a backstory thing and didn't
Mm-hmm.
come to the forefront a lot. I had a lot of internal experience thinking about it, right? And so I think like I highly recommend everyone get a ghost girlfriend in one of their RPGs. I feel great about it, and the Cicatrix feels great about it, and probably has some elaborate, probably illegal scheme to go see the girlfriend more. So,
That is super awesome, and I guess that kind of that's a nice segue to
mm,
my next question. So a woman with hollow eyes,
yes.
the interactive streaming actual play of Invisible Sun. Super excited, coming out the second season right in
Yes.
2020. Just finished up on Kickstarter a couple months ago. Um, what teasers are you willing to divulge concerning season two?
Good question. So the sort of product, the PDF accompaniment
Mhm.
for A Woman with Hollow Eyes is still coming probably at the beginning of next year. But we did film all of season two, so we did stream that. But I think a lot of people haven't watched it yet. Um, there are huge differences between A Woman with Hollow Eyes and The Raven Wants What You Have. And I think there already is huge differences between everybody else who's streaming this show. So I think it's been really cool to see how wildly different in tone, in story, in pace, in content these games are. And so I will say for people who watch A Woman with Hollow Eyes season one, um, it was really cool. It was I had a blast. I loved it a lot, but I did not have the black cube for any of that. And so there was just like, season two, I finally get the black cube. I pull out props. We get to play with the whole physical
Yes.
experience. And so that was huge as, it was cool to see how much it influenced it. I would use the guiding hand as like the
Mhm.
GM notebook that's in there. It's
Yeah,
really cool.
so good.
Oh, it's so good. And it's got like little ideas and like NPC names you can throw in a given session. And so I used some of those. I riffed off a lot with backers. So backers really helped me craft that whole season. Same with season one, but season two, like even more so
Yeah.
maybe. um, but what I will say is there's a point in season 2 where the players somehow, like, I had Invisible Sun, a game of surreal fantasy, magic, and secrets. It posits that the world around us is a lie and that the real world is the actuality, where magic is real, where you play magical nerds, fiddling with, reality and maybe making emotional cupcake stores. Great. Uh, there are secrets. There's a secrets folder in the Black Cube that the GM only is allowed to read. Um, I didn't have it for season 1, and I avoided it like the plague for season 2, just because, like, I don't know, I was nervous, and like the game, everybody told me that the game would be really different once you read the secrets, and they were right. Um, but I basically hadn't read it, and unknowingly, my players and I were sort of playing to a very particular truth about the world. And so at one point, we announced this all over the episode, but we do engage with one of those, like, kind of game changing secrets. So I know a number of people stopped watching at that point, and I think that was the right choice. I think you have all of season 1 to enjoy, and most of season 2. But at some point we engage with the secret, and so spoilers ahoy at the end of that season. If you're not a GM, you're not allowed to watch the rest of the episodes. Sorry. I struggled about whether to deal with that, but the players had unknowingly played so well into that secret that I felt there was nothing I could do, but I tried to warn people a lot. So pretty fun, pretty wild, pretty game breaking. Oh my gosh, it was great.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was really good.
So, what was the process like kind of setting up season 2 and prepping for it and getting ready? I mean, now you have the Black Cube, so everything's changed.
Oh my gosh. Um, my process, because I live on the south side of Chicago, and the streaming studio is up on kind of the north side. I feel like my process was, it alternated between, like, you know, calls with backers who were helping me shape certain episodes in the arc. And so I would have these sort of workshopping sessions with some of the backers, and we would outline some ideas we had, and like beats we wanted to hit. And so I would have those, and then on my way to each session, I would have some idea. But often, like, I would like listen to music on the L, and I would like get in the zone and like think about things. I would go to the Ritual coffee shop.
Ooh, that's perfect.
A really cool, weird, yeah, exactly, record playing coffee shop. I would have like a chai latte. I would sit down and I would like thumb through pages and pages, and just like I would kind of let something from the path, which is kind of like the setting book, or something from later on Secrets of Silent Streets, which is like an expanded setting book. I would like let some of these locations wash over me, or ideas, or like NPCs. And I think it sort of would coalesce from there. So I would always have like a tiny little note card of like NPCs I wanted to bring in, or plot points I wanted to hit. And I would say 50-50, it would get thrown out the window as something new happened. But that was my process. It was really fun. I find that there's a ton of resources in that Black Cube exactly for that purpose, to basically prepare you with cool locations, hooks, NPCs, and ideas to react to the players when they bring you stuff, because it's a very reactive system, as you know. So I would just try to think of like cool things that could happen at some point, cool people that could be doing stuff, and the idea of kind of like, if the players do nothing, what happens,
Yeah, definitely. And I really love the GM, the little notebook with the names. I was using those names all the time.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's great to hear.
Like every session.
I mean, honestly, when I first started GMing, that was one of the things I struggled with most, was like, and I just think when you learn to GM for the first time, everybody's different in what's going to be hard for them. And I was like, names. Oh my God, are names hard?
Yeah, same with me. One of the villains for a World of Darkness game, his name was Greg.
Oh, yep. Oh my gosh. I would always like string together like almost unpronounceable like phonemes together, right? And then I could never remember them. And so I love that like, and so like one of my GM prep things that I do for most games is like to just have a list of like some names that I can use, and if I'm running like Numenera or something, some like weird things that I could sprinkle in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I love that like basically those two things are already built into your like little session by session page
Hmm.
as a GM.
Yeah.
I love that you're using it too. Good.
Yeah, it's like I'm horrible with names, and it
Yeah,
has created some
it's so
amazing
hard.
NPCs and nice little story hooks too. So it was amazing.
I'm so glad. How far are you into the campaign or into running it?
Oh man, so I was running it about every other week. I think we had about
Nice.
7 or 8 sessions. I've taken a break to stream because this has been
Okay.
like a recent thing.
Nice.
But my players are poking me to be like, when are
Oh,
we doing the thing?
have you done development mode at all? My favorite
Oh,
part of Invisible
development
Sun.
with some people, yes, yes,
Cool.
that is amazing, and it's one of
Oh,
my. I love a game that kind of emphasizes the in between and what you're
yes.
doing and stuff like that. That's always been a huge important part of. I think utilizing skills that are normally not used in like a session,
Mm-hmm.
like baking or or
Yeah.
just just so much stuff.
Uh, yeah. Development mode is the there's a lot of really cool game design in the Black Cube, and it just when you open that thing, it's just so clear that it's like a labor of love of Monty, right? Like all the spiral bound notebook, like he was like because it lays flat and it can like totally
Yeah.
wrap around so you can actually use it at the table if you're space limited, all the little details. But development mode is the thing that I am most kind of desperate to bring to other games. um, it's just it's quick, beautiful little vignettes of what's happening with your different characters in between sessions. And so you use the sooth deck, this sort of tarot deck thing,
Yes.
to like so I always love the example of like if I'm playing with a thief, the thief solo heist is like a great thief moment in like a movie, but is like super sucks for the other players.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can't participate and they're at the table waiting, and so it's perfect for development mode. And so I always love the idea that you're like I always love like setting up a heist and like, okay, your plan to get around the guards is X, and you're going to do this, and you're going to wait for this, and you're bringing in this demon, and then and we go, okay, now like how does it actually go? And you draw a card, and it just always seems to inspire all these cool ideas. So I love development mode.
Yeah, and the Sooth deck is amazing. I love the just drawing it and seeing what it'll impact on the scene
Yeah.
or
Oh,
the
totally.
like that. It's just one of my
I'm
favorite things.
always pulling it for inspiration.
Yeah.
I probably should plug that Invisible Sun has been out of stock for quite a while. We had to do another print. We funded another print run with Kickstarter, which is awesome because we just had no idea how niche and this weird game would be, and it's been awesome to see that more people are loving it. And it's up for a couple of Ennies this year at Gen Con. Oh
Yeah.
my
What was it art
god!
maybe layout? I forget all of them, but
Production value might be one. I forget. Yeah.
yeah, maybe unique setting.
Oh, I think it might be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's
I should look.
definitely. I know. I was looking at it the other day, but I was like trying to like get everything in my head. In those viewing, you can kind of almost see all my Invisible Sun books back
Yeah.
there with the box on my left. So definitely an amazing game. With a it's enchanting, has a unique setting. But I do have to ask. So
Yeah.
the bind for the game is
Yeah.
more than the average role playing game. Um, why was it presented in such a fashion? And I guess for those who are like, I don't know, maybe what would be like
Mm.
your home run pitch to bring them in?
I love it. Yeah. Uh, so I would say that the reason it came to life in the way that it did, I think at its core is that um, magic is cool. Full stop. Right? Like nobody's gonna argue that magic is uncool, and that like uh, so in a game of like Dungeons and Dragons, you might have a wizard, you might have a sorcerer, you've got a warrior, you've got some character classes that can
Mhm.
use magic and some that can't. Um, they might have access to kind of different spells, but it means that some people are engaging with magic and some people aren't, and that's great. That's super fun. Sometimes I don't want to deal with magic, but what Monty wanted to do, I think, in a major way was create a game in which magic felt like this wild, unpredictable, um, like unique and infinitely changing and infinite discovery like element,
Yeah.
right? You want he's phrased it as like a game that makes magic feel magical, right? And so everybody can engage with some kind of magic in Invisible Sun. You have your Vances who like capture spells like living things in their heads and use Vancian casting, kind of like D&D, but they map out physical spells on these cards in their like mind space. And if you really love a spell, you can you can fold it over in half and physically bend the card and have it you take up half space. There are goetics where you're summoning things, and there are all these different ways that you can engage with like demons and angels and ghosts and convince them to do your bidding. There are the weavers, which are great for like improvisational players that like don't want to pick from a list of options. They want to like make something new and unique each time.
Yeah.
And so they're weaving together the concept of you know like sound from the concept of thunder, and they're weaving together like travel or something from the concept of infinity, right? And they'll create a spell that creates a big boom and zoops you ahead a few paces, right? uh, and like so there's sort of like your class-based magic. There's also hundreds of cards of individual cool spells you can pick from, just general spells, so you can have this hodgepodge of weird abilities. And then you can unlock secrets, which are like, I want to talk to ants. I can talk to ants now. What a weird character secret. There's one, where, there are all these secrets you unlock if you die. There's a whole other part of the game about becoming a more powerful ghost and engaging with weird ghostly magics. And there's the Sooth deck, which is representing how magical currents are ebbing and flowing constantly, making you look at your options and your capabilities differently with each turn
Yeah.
of combat, with each scene. And so that's just like explaining why there's a bunch of weird subsystems around magic, but like it really is cool, right? And so this would be way too complex a system if you didn't have all the player aids that Monty built in here. It's just like, if you want wild magic options, um, and you don't want to do in like mad calculus and have to build all these tools for yourself for your own
Yeah.
reference, Monty wanted to make it easy and fast and fun. And so that's a huge reason of why the tactile elements. And then the other side of it, so there's sort of like weird magic, making it magical, making it mysterious. Physical componentry goes a long way to that. But there's also the fact that, like, I think he was just thinking about the way that we play a lot of games online. There's like way more games available now. There's cool one-page RPGs. I love like Lasers and Feelings. There's all there, Honey Heist, all kinds of like really zany, cool, lo-fi games out there that you can play online, that you can play at the drop of a hat. It's super cool. But like, there's also, so we've been, I feel like the industry has been designing toward kind of like lo-fi, cool, light, quick, zany stuff, and that's awesome, and I love it,
Yeah.
and I play a lot of it. But like, what would a game built exclusively for the physical experience look like is kind of the design constraint of Invisible Sun. And so it's thinking about that six-fingered hand that's behind you, right? It holds a Sooth card so everyone can see it. It's super atmospheric. People like people who get those like mysterious package company puzzles, like it has that tactility,
Yeah.
that joy of mystery and tactility and pulling out weird new props and getting just your mind blown again and again as it keeps unfolding more secrets for you to explore. So that's like why physical, right? And we have released a PDF only version of it. It is outrageous and it has so many files, and it's a like messy, beautiful, complicated beast. But it's really useful for. There are some people who are playing it online, right? Like I've guested in it online, and it's kind of a pain, but it's doable, and it's people make exceptions all the time, but it really does sing when you can touch it. And I think some people will gravitate more toward that tactility, and some people it won't matter as much to them, and that's totally fine. Um, And then I guess if I want to give the selling point, right? So I think the pre-order is, I'm not actually sure what it's pre-ordering for. Let me look
Ooh,
just because.
yeah.
So if we're going to compare to sort of the granddaddy of RPGs, right? Dungeons and Dragons. Um, when we talk about price point, if you want everything that a gaming group needs to play, you're going to want at least a player's guide, probably more, at least in my experience, because even if you're sharing it at a table, nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants to wait for one copy. So player's guide, a dungeon master's guide, and probably a monster manual for lots of beasties. There's plenty of other books D&D is happy to sell you, not to mention dice and notebooks, and some people use like spell cards. But even if you just keep it to sort of the three books, those are retailing about $50 a pop, which is $150, sort of bare minimum. Invisible Sun is pre-ordering for $250, 252. The pre-order currently comes with all of it in PDF, which won't be forever, so that's a pretty sweet gig already. And what I love about it is it has all these beautifully printed character tomes. It has these character handouts, sheets. It has dice. It has tokens. Like it has, the GM notebook, and it has props and stationery. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, and it has over 1,000 cards in it, right? It's just, it is so much material, and like really beautiful stuff, and then like carefully, made and pretty, gosh, what is it like? At least five books in there, and I think more.
Yeah, I mean, one,
Yeah,
two, three,
yeah.
four, five, six, seven. Let's see. Yeah, four books for the base, and then there's
Yeah.
there's three more books.
And there's an art book, and there's a cloth
Yes.
map, two cloth maps, no, a cloth map and a cloth like diagram of the path of suns. It comes with that big hand. It just like, it is a high price tag, and like I have, as a biology grad student, I did not kickstart this when it came out because I was like, that is, I would love to play it. I cannot afford it. I understand you. Uh, but what I did was I went in on it with, James D'Amato. I actually messaged a few friends of mine. I was like, okay, could we get a group together and I'll pitch in a little bit since we'll all be using the components. And so I contacted my friend Mika and James D'Amato, and James was like, let's stream it. And so he had
Yes.
Wetshot get it, which was perfect. So ideally, get James D'Amato to buy the game. I don't know, or buy the game and let you play with him. That's been my solution. But we even do have like a group purchase bundle to sort of help people out, who are trying to all sort of chip in and get some like little goodies for themselves as well. Like there's for people who like want some experience of it but aren't sure if they want the whole thing. Some people have been getting the Secrets of Silent Streets book, which I suspect you have back there,
Yep.
just to get a taste of the setting. So it's just a book packed full of cool setting material about the city of Satyrine. And so a lot of people have been checking that out as sort of a, do I love this world? If yes, then I can go in and still use this book. If not, then it's a cool
Yeah,
book
it's a
full of
good
art
book
and,
for any, like, if you're running any role playing game, it's a good book to draw stuff from.
oh
So
yeah,
much on
totally.
there.
Yeah, it's like not, not much crunch there. It's really there for like cool story elements for you. And then the other thing is there's like Visley kits, which are sort of a little rectangular prism that pops open and has like extra character sheets, extra dice. So I know like one of the problems some friends of mine were having, they were like, okay, like I know I want to be able to touch something from Invisible Sun. Like I can't bear to be a player. Like it doesn't make sense to get the whole cube, but like I want some of that fun tactility for
Yeah.
myself. And so we are selling like the Sooth deck by itself, which is super sweet and I love, and like the Visley kit. So this is
Yeah.
my rant. I could rant about Invisible Sun all day.
I mean,
So
it's an
stop
amazing
me.
game. Yeah.
Sorry. It's a
Yeah.
great game.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So actually, Davidson 925
Yeah.
says, "Have you actually seen anyone bin one of the Vance cards?"
Uh, no, I have not. But I also haven't played with a Vance yet, have I? Because there's, I when I played with the Raven Wants What You Have, we had a
Yeah.
baker, we had an apostate who's me, which
Mm-hmm.
was so fun, and I loved
Apostates
just,
are so cool.
oh, they're so cool. Love it. Yeah, we didn't. I haven't played with Advance yet, which is heartbreaking. I guess I did play with I played with my roommate John
Mhm.
Harness, who's an awesome like game designer in his own right. He guested on A Woman with Hollow Eyes season 2, but he like I don't know if we didn't have the Vance cards yet or something, or we didn't have the full black cube. I feel like he wrote all his spells on like sheets, snippets of paper, and
Oh
was
my.
and so like he was a high level Vance, but I he did not bend a real card to do it. So I'm excited. Like I want to see pictures when someone
Yeah,
like
I want to see that too. That's
Mars it.
whew, that'd be tough for me to do.
I think they did. We did something where you can just get the like extras of the cards. Um, so I think I forget where it is. If basically if your dog eats like a bunch of the cards from the black cube, we have something in place where you can like print up extras.
Yeah.
I think you might have to like I think it might be a like get all of it at once. I forget how it works. I When we played season 1 of A Woman with Hollow Eyes, um, I like printed up through Drive Through RPG. Like I printed on like our
Yeah.
own dime a whole set of those cards, and it came to like $100. So when I look at the price tag of the Black Cube and it's only 250, I'm like $100 is what I spent on some of the cards. Ah,
Yeah, and I'm really excited about was it Book M's extra cards.
yeah. I haven't gotten to sift through them yet. I still have them in like the plastic, but like I'm ready. Did you bust them out yet?
No, I am in the same position.
Okay. I can't wait to yeah, I need to break them open.
Yeah.
And there's even there's the directed campaign. I don't know if you're familiar with that a little
I
bit.
am familiar. I have yet to. I was in a game where we were doing the directed campaign. Did a couple of
Ooh.
sessions. It was super awesome,
Okay,
super
good.
interesting. But we kind of like moved away. So,
Yep.
but
Ah,
so
sad.
good.
Uh that was so the directed campaign also has some like some cool like goodies that get shipped to people as part of it. So it's both like kind of cool things that could be happening in your world, and different choices you make mean you'll get different like packets of information and places and things and events, as well as like some really really cool physical like props and like extra cards. And I won't say much more because I'm probably not allowed to spoil what
Yeah,
exactly comes in the directed campaign, but it's cool stuff. So now I'm like I want to play with those cards.
I
Someone's
know.
got to
Me
run
too.
Invisible Sun for me.
Oh man, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've only been in one game and I've been GMing it, but as a GM, it is one of the most like satisfying games to GM for.
Oh,
Just so many
oh,
options.
good. I'm really glad. What do you like most about it?
For me, I like the surrealism.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, something that you're just like you could think of anything and you could have a reason for it to be a part of the game and part of the
Hmm.
story.
Yeah.
And it's just I also kind of like the progressiveness of the game, right? You could be anything, you can do
Yeah.
anything. It's all out there.
And it puts the players behind the driving wheel in a lot of ways that I like. You know, when I come to a session, when I was trying to like quickly wrap up certain arcs of A Woman with Hollow Eyes, there were certain things I knew I wanted to touch on before the season ended, and so
Hmm.
I came in with a heavier hand than is really intended for Invisible Sun. But when I've played, elsewise, like I just ran a little like one shot for some friends in Chicago, and I came in and I was like, okay, like I could have them like go here, and there's this festival, and like literally everything I prepped, I left behind because I was just sort of trying to send an opening scene, and I was like, okay, like where do we've done a little like a quick short version of like the first session where you build each other's neighborhoods. One of my absolute favorite
Yeah.
parts of Invisible Sun.
So
Oh my god,
fun.
so cool! I could talk about it all day, but I won't. So we had done that, and I was like, okay, so like where do you guys hang out? Where do we find you as we open on the scene? And one of the players, uh, Shar, who's really active on the Discord and who does really great like layout work for cool cipher system supplements. Shar was like, "Oh, well, we're at my house and I'm throwing a murder mystery party. And we're actually looking for the body of a ghost in my house. And if we don't find it by sun up, someone in the house will die. And I was like, thank you, Shar, for giving me a one shot. Like, that's what we're doing now. Yeah, it just like, because I think the players have their character arcs that they are pursuing and sort of can look at their sheet and be like, oh yeah, I'm still trying to like establish a
Yeah.
business or make this friendship. They, when I ask them what they want to do, they have like clear objectives that they're working toward. Um, and also like they've got all these cool world building content that they've built from the first session, right? They've got NPCs they care about and local issues that they care about, and that weird neighbor who they're very suspicious of. That like, those hooks that they build, they're like desperate to pursue, and so there's so much energy behind each player. It just
Oh yeah,
rocks.
definitely. It was one of my favorite. I think my first short term goal, and I looked to the person I write, and I'm like, is to fall in love, and like you're the person I plan to.
Yes, cute. Oh my gosh. Oh, was this in the session, the 6 episode one that you played?
Yeah, for that one, yep.
Cool. Did you get very far in it?
I did. So I, we were building a budding romance, he
Oh.
and I, and it was, we were going places, and then,
Oh my God.
yeah,
Now I'm really heartbroken.
I
Please
know.
development mode the rest of your relationship and put it online so I can read it. Because I'm just heartbroken broken hearing about it.
The romance of the ages as he was sucked away and never to be seen again.
Oh my goodness.
Ah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's I think one of the cool things about Invisible Sun is having these almost mundane like storylines in a very surreal, fantastical world. When you're like,
Yes.
yeah, keys are falling out of the sky, but what I'm really hoping is that I can deliver these roses to
Uh,
my friend down the street.
I think those that duality sweetens each other so well. Like,
Hmm.
the vast weirdness of the world gets to feel weirder when you do very mundane tasks to sort of project it against. And like, I don't know, something about I like the game. I somehow like players who I would not have expected to get so into some of the more mundane plot lines absolutely dive in with full feet, you know, um, for this game. And so something about the way it's set up really lets you have both worlds and lets them feed off of each other in great ways. Ugh,
Definitely.
love it.
So Davidson says every other Friday, Darcy, come on over if you want to play Invisible Sun. Uh,
Hop on the plane. I'm
and
so excited.
yeah, and South said you could always play it on here, or I can run it for you.
Very tempting.
Yeah, so anytime.
Oh goodness, I'm in.
Yeah. So you were talking about kind of jumping all over
Yeah.
to this other place. There is a recent trend in recent games of exploring themes other than those typical of a fantasy game.
Mm,
Like depression, loss,
yeah.
parenting, for example. For
Mhm.
GMs who are also interested in exploring a different side of storytelling, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, very cool. Uh, I think so. I'll start with the standard advice of kind of getting buy-in from your players and understanding where your lines and your veils might be, right? So I might be interested in. I'm trying to think of what I can say without any stream spoilers. So when I had a player uh, who had a really cool romance with an NPC,
Mhm.
um, in sort of as we returned to that storyline, uh, I saw that relationship as something that I could like threaten in a really interesting way. Right? That's an emotional hook I can now pull on now that there's an established relationship.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to play with that because I think um, there were dangerous things about, and I wanted to pull on things that were important to the player. But I told them sort of off stream, like, I am not going to kill or take away that person. That person is safe.
Hmm.
I know that I've alluded that dangerous things are happening, but I will not GM fiat bad, like devastating bad things happening to that character.
Yeah.
And so I sort of set up a line, right? I was like, okay, this is the line that I'm not willing to cross because like that's not the story I want to tell. That would just be too sad for me.
Yeah.
um, and like if he, decided, hey, actually I do want to go there, then I might open it up. But like I really liked that relationship and I wanted to keep it. So I just talked to my players about some sort of lines in the sand I had.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's also veils, right, where there are things that can happen, but I just don't want to like live them on screen. And so that might be things like like sex, right? Like you're having a sexy time, you have a hot date, and we like close the veil
Yeah.
on that, and we know
Curtain
that they're having
closes.
exactly the sock is on the door, and we walk away, right? We, you can have that internal experience of thinking about it, but we're not going to play that out on screen. Same with like intense violence and stuff. And things with like parenting, right? Like um, a lot of people can have like different experiences with their own parents, with trying to become a parent, or a lot of people have obviously intense emotional reactions around those things, and sort of finding like what's the tone of the game that we're going to explore these themes in, right? Is parenting like is it going to be the like cute vignettes of like a budding parent, and like adorable like missteps but no like real crises, or are we getting into the deeper kind of
Yeah.
harder stuff? And then so I think setting up those kind of lines and veils is really helpful. I'm also trying to think. I'm sure there are people more experienced than me, so I would probably ask around for some more advice if it were me diving into some of those. Um, and I guess like there's the initial setup, and then there's also kind of X card in the moment. How do we curate how things are going, right? So like checking in with your players, knowing that your players have sort of a button they can press to be like, ooh, actually, like let's step away from this. This is getting too intense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know my group and a few
Mm-hmm.
others, especially in some of the recent games, use like the X card, which I think has been an amazing new thing.
Yeah, and I've also heard of groups using like red, yellow, and green. Sort of like red is like, oh my gosh, I'm out. Like stop. We need to stop this scene or stop this game, and I need a break.
Yeah.
Yellow is like, we're doing okay, but like don't escalate. And green is like you could tap it if you're like, I'm in character yelling at you, and I want to know if you're okay. You can be like, oh yeah. LARPers have a really handy tool that I've totally appropriated, um, which is OK check-in. So I'm
Hmm.
sure I'm going to misexplain this a little bit, but if I'm speaking in character to you, Mitch, and I'm, we're really getting into it, either something like intensely emotional or intensely, maybe I'm really mad at you, and so I'm speaking these things in character, and maybe my facial expressions are also in character, or maybe they're not. Mitch, are you looking at me as your character or as Mitch looking horrified?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so without breaking the flow of the narrative, I could go, hey, are you, or I could go, hey, are you okay? So I could still be speaking and go, hey, are you okay? And you could either flash back, oh yeah, I'm good. Keep it coming.
Keep it
You
going.
could, you could do sort of okay, but like, don't escalate, or you could do like tone it down, right? So there's all these I'm fascinated by like nonverbal ways that we can sort of curate the narrative. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there are more tools, but
Yeah. I'm very curious because I was LARPing for a long
oh,
time,
cool.
and that's definitely a part because I remember a LARPer coming over and crying at my character, and I'm like, "Are you
Yeah,
okay?" Because it was real tears.
yeah,
I was like, "Are you
yeah,
okay?" She's like, "Yeah, yes, part of it." I was like, "Okay."
yeah,
And
right?
even like for me, it was uncomfortable because I'm like, "Oh, she's crying."
Oh, yeah. And maybe that's a thing that like you need to like
Yeah,
de-escalate,
like
right? Like to some extent, I don't know how well I could keep in character, right? Um, my I've also seen sort of the out of character symbol, the sort of
yeah,
I'm speaking and I'm speaking out of character. There's one that's a player used where they did something that was like I'm telepathically telling you, which comes up in like Numenera and Invisible Sun. I'm saying this, but or I'm reading your mind. I forget what the symbol was.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
damn,
I know for
which
our
makes sense.
LARP, we would do this all
Oh,
the time.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
And that's like I'm
yeah.
telepathing to you.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so cool. I love that. I need like um I I'm wondering if that's covered. There's some really good LARP guides that I need to just read properly. The American Guide to Freeform, is a great one by Lizzie Stark, and I'm sure there's more books that deal with some of this tech. But it
Yeah,
seems very
definitely.
like group specific. People
Hmm.
have their different techniques.
Oh yeah, it can. And like just going to another place and you're like, oh, what do you do? Like I've had some people like this isn't OO's character and they'll do something else and it's like
Yeah,
just adapting to everyone's LARPing or LARPing culture.
yeah.
So DM by actually has a question. Do you have a theater background or anything? They are considering doing some improv to become a better GM or role
Oh,
player.
so cool. So I don't have much of a theater background. I was like I was in theater tech and pretty bad at that. I took a little bit of improv back in high school, um, but yeah, I don't have a lot of theater experience or improv experience. But I am fascinated by the tools that we can learn from improvisers. And there's actually a really great book. There's a couple of books that just came out that are on my like shelfie right now, waiting to be read. One is Improv for Gamers, and so it's a really cool series of like improv techniques and tools for you as a player or a GM to basically do exactly what you're saying. DM buyer, like skills that you can build up, warm up tools that you can use, and then there's also the Ultimate RPG Character Creation Guide by James D'Amato, which uses a bunch of like improv tools to help you think about um, developing a really cool character, which is something I personally struggle with. So I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to that. And then he's got a new like series of exercises, I think possibly for the GM coming out soon. So check out James D'Amato. One of the best tools that I've been introduced to recently, and I'm like dying to share it, is like is this exercise to walk down like a hallway like your character would walk. Okay, so like it's really weird, but like let's say you've just created a character, you're trying to like figure out kind of who they are, how you role play them, and the exercises that everybody like takes an opportunity to sort of exaggeratedly walk like their character would. And like there's just not that much you can do when you're walking unless you're getting really big with it. But there's recently heard an improviser talking about the way that even small physical changes can sort of have this cascading effect about how you carry the rest of the character. So
Yeah.
this improviser was telling me like when he's trying to role play NPCs, he'll jot down like a physical characteristic of theirs, and so it could be straight shouldered, it could be hunched, it could be slow speaking, it could be sneers, right? And so even though these are like very specific, pretty minor features, it embodies the character in all these other ways. When you start to hunch, you're going to change your voice a little bit, and it's easier to remember to hunch than it is to like somehow write down
Yeah.
specific cadence and all that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I definitely, when I started streaming, I went to improv class. And I think one of the most important things to learn from improv and stuff like that is just breaking down these barriers that prevent you from being silly. Because you're going
Yes.
to be
Oh,
silly in a role
yeah.
playing game. Whether you're doing voices, it's going to be silly. It's going to look silly.
That is such a good point.
Yeah.
And like silly walking down a hallway, great way to just shake off the.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, so many warm up exercises for improvisers are kind of just getting weird. Just get weird and go there. And now you've been maximum weird, and anything you do today will be a little easier.
Exactly. Go Max Weird. All right, so
Yeah.
we are coming up on an hour and five, and I know you have
Yay.
a very important stream coming up very soon.
Mhm.
So what do you have as your last closing statements to all those here?
Goodness. My last closing statement, I think, is that my cat's gonna break in. So hello, Chewy.
Oh
Took
wow,
yeah.
that's
Well
impressive.
done. Good job. Um, I think my last thing that I want to say is that RPGs are wild, cool, collaborative storytelling experiences that you can bring so many different kinds of expertise in. You can do art, you can do improv. It's this very dynamic activity. And what's great about it is that you can always be improving at something. You can always be trying to add some new tool. And so I guess my homework for everybody is to is to try and think about a new thing that they could work on or a new technique that they could try out and they don't have to love. Next time you game, uh, go for speaking more in character, or see if you could think about like talking to another player about having a romance arc with them, right?
Mhm.
Kind of try out these things that might scare you, because I think you'll learn a lot, and there's just an endless amount of diverse experiences that we can have. And like, I'm just so hungry to have them all. And I want you to have as many as you can and tell me about it, because I have a finite time on this earth. So go out and have weird games, folks.
All right, you heard it. Darcy Rost with the Go Be Weird, Go Game.
Go have your best games ever,
Exactly,
etc.
exactly. So yeah, Darcy, thank you so much for being on the show. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it, and have a wonderful stream. And I know I'll be at Gen Con. Hope to see everyone else at Gen Con, and definitely, I believe you'll be there too, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We've got some really cool stuff. If you're at all interested in MCG, come to an evening with MCG. It's a ticketed event, but it's a cool, like, intimate time where you can hang out with me and the rest of the team. And we make it really special. It's in this cool, weird basement. It's awesome. Come to it. It's Friday.
There's a basement, and it's Friday.
You'll love it.
It'll be amazing.
I'll probably be cosplaying.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, guys. Thank you very much, and you guys have a wonderful day.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.